Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. We are in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 4. Let's start with verse 1. When Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage and all Israel became alarmed. Now Saul's son had two men who were leaders of raiding bands. One was named Baanath and the other Rechab. They were sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite from the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth was considered part of Benjamin because the people of Beeroth fled to Gibeon and have lived there as aliens to this day. When Ishbosheth heard that Abner had died, he was afraid. Probably it did not get to him accurately. Most news traveled by rumor. Probably nobody came as a messenger from David to Ishbosheth and Ishbosheth, and probably Abner did not have a messenger to send back. He came with a relatively small group. He probably meant to be the messenger himself. Joab himself would not have sent a messenger. So the rumor mill got started. Probably what got back to him sounded a whole lot like David killed your best general. And unfortunately, that's not what happened, but he would have been very afraid. For one thing, he's made this guy mad. He's been doing politics behind his back, and now he's been killed, so he can't even defend you, Ishbosheth, even if he tried. Ishbosheth probably didn't know how badly he's compromised, and he doesn't know whether David is in the midst of preparing an attack without his general, if he is gathered important information, and so he's due to be afraid because he's not the man of war his father was, or even his brothers were. And we're introduced to two of his commanders of raiding parties. They're not really proper soldiers. They were people who led people to raid other countries, kill and steal, collect booty from other people to enhance the royal coffers. It was an accepted political system at the time. Everybody did it. Everybody raided somebody else. You even raided your stronger neighbors sometime because they had more goods. Everybody did it. David had done it. The Philistines did it. The Amalekites did it. In fact, that's the main thing that the Amalekites got wealth from. They lived out where you just couldn't grow enough food for the people they had, and they had to depend upon stealing from other people. But the Moabites, the Ammonites, everybody did it. Edom did it. Hittites did it. Jebusites did it. I mean, as far as we know, every people group in the Middle East, including the Egyptians, raided other lands to get booty to keep their economy running. And your standing army, its main job was to keep the other raiding parties out. So the stronger your country was, the fewer raiding parties you had. invading your country. The weaker you were, the more raiding parties you had coming through your country. And it would have been much better to have a system where there was trade and I want what you have and here's what I have. And instead of you stealing it from me and me stealing what you have from you, how about we meet at the border and exchange what you have that I want and I'll exchange what I have that you want. That's largely what our current world is based on. But that's not the way they thought. That's not the way they acted. And this Baanah and Rechab, they were two commanders of two raiding parties. And they were from a town that originally was not part of Israel, but the inhabitants fled and the Benjamites took it over because apparently they had been raided enough by the Benjamites that they got tired of it and left. And the Benjamites took over. Verse 4. Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell and became crippled. His name was Mephibosheth. We're in the process of setting up this scene. Jonathan had a son. When his dad died, the boy was 5. The nurse, instead of having the 5-year-old run, and they were all concerned that the Philistines would come and raid the place and kill all the royal family, so they were hurrying to get out of Gibeah and get somewhere that they thought was safer. She picked him up and ran with him. And she tripped and fell. And Mephibosheth ended up with damaged feet and was lame the rest of his life. A ignoble condition for him. So we know Jonathan has a son, and he has grown up. It's now a few years later. If you've been following the chronology, it's about 7 years later because Ishbosheth rules for 7 years. And David is in the process of becoming king. And we're going to get to the rest of the political mechanisms that happened to change the situation. Abner starts the process but gets murdered, so can't finish it. It would have probably been better for Israel if Joab had kept his head and not killed Abner and dealt with it as a legal matter after David was anointed king. But that's not the way it happened. Verse 5. Now Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerite, set out for the house of Ishbosheth, and they arrived there in the heat of day while he was taking his noonday rest. His two leaders of his two raiding parties go to his house in the middle of the day at siesta time. There was no air conditioning. They did not have down good building techniques that kept insides of buildings reasonable temperature year-round. They did not have the ability to heat them well or cool them, for that matter. And so they changed their practices instead of using construction techniques. And when it got too hot, you just took a nap. Everybody took a nap, and when it cooled off, you got up and started doing work again. Actually, probably not a bad thing. The current scientific understanding of rest, they're saying that if we took a afternoon nap, a siesta, we would be healthier and live longer, and that we would be less stressed, and our blood pressure would be lower, and our heart disease would be lower, and risk of stroke would be lower, and risk of diabetes would be lower, and risk of cancer would be lower, and on and on and on. Most of the things that kill us here in our modern society would be lower if we took a siesta every day. We've lost something. I'm all in favor. If you're going to take a vote, I'll vote for a siesta every day. It is part of the culture. But they arrived there at siesta time, and that's where they found him, inside his house, taking a nap. Verse 6. They went into the inner part of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped away. So his two leaders of his raiding parties killed him in his own house while he was taking a nap at siesta time. Verse 7. They had gone into the house while he was lying on the bed in his bedroom. After they stabbed and killed him, they cut off his head. Taking it with them, they traveled all night by way of the Arabah. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who tried to take your life. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring." Now, they went a somewhat roundabout route, and they went an easy to travel path, but a hard path to detect them. They also traveled all night. They were moving fairly fast. The path they traveled probably was about 35 to 40 miles. The straight shot would have been 20. It would have been a hard day's hike, but possible to do it. And if they took overnight, fairly easy walk to do overnight and get there. Traveling by the road, though, they would have probably been detected, and lots of people along the path would have known that they had killed Ishbosheth. They instead went by the wilderness, a fairly easy path through the wilderness. The Arabah was the Jordan Valley. It generally flowed downhill and was fairly level and was basically grassy fields. So they were going through grassy fields at night, carrying the head of Ishbosheth. They were going to carry the evidence that Ishbosheth was dead. Let's face it, you can identify him. You know, if the head's not attached to the body, he's dead. You know, they were expecting to get some sort of political strengthening. They had gotten probably the rumor that Abner had made an alliance with David, and so they're trying to curry favor. And they did the deed, and they brought the evidence, and they traveled hard to get there in less than a day. They were running most of the way. And if you're running that far, that hard, you're not thinking through. And they present themselves to David, and they tell him they killed his enemy. They really don't understand David. Saul is not his enemy. Saul's son is not his enemy. he has intentionally made an oath in front of his own men to not harm Saul and his family and Jonathan and his family, which, of course, Jonathan and his family were all part of Saul's family. And he has steadfastly, multiple times, not killed Saul when God put him in his hands. Ishbosheth has not been trying to kill David. Well, we have no evidence of it. He's trying to maintain his own kingship, sure, but he's not been actively seeking to kill David. He's not been invading Judah. He's basically, after the battle where Abner and his forces were defeated by Joab and his forces, has left the border alone, not done anything about it. They have conducted raiding parties against each other, and there's all kinds of war going on, but they've not been trying to invade Judah. If he had called up the whole country, they probably could have successfully invaded Judah. Now, I doubt that that would have worked because God's protecting David. God would have caused David and his men to be better organized, better fighting, know the territory better, etc. They had some military advantages, better organization, stronger leader. David was smarter at warfare. And he consults with God routinely. Saul and his forces have basically dispensed with God and trying to do it all on their own. Ishbosheth, being the weak leader, probably hasn't started trying to rely on God. And Abner, while he was a good general, he was probably not any different than his nephew Saul in his house. So these two malcontents from Benjamin murder Ishbosheth and bring him down to David. They're expecting to get politically rewarded for it. Verse 9. David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah, the son of Rimmon, the Beerothite, as surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of trouble, when a man told me Saul is dead and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death at Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house, in his own bed, should I not demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you? David kind of does shade his judgment against the Amalekite that claimed he killed Saul. By this point in time, David has thought about it, has realized that he probably heard the truth from other sources, that the Amalekite did not kill Saul. He passed judgment on him in his own testimony. You killed the Lord's anointed, well, you die. Well, he's thought about it, he's heard the truth, that he was just an opportunist trying to claim that Saul was dead and get political favor for it. And he says, the man just was passing the news to me, and I killed him for it. Not quite the way David really did it. He took his own testimony and says, okay, you killed him, you die. You testified you killed him, you die. But, for such a minor offense, I killed a man. How much more when you admit to me you killed the king in his own house, when he's innocent, in his own bed, and you admit to it. David's passing the same righteous judgment he did on the Amalekite. You testified with your own mouth you killed this man. He was innocent. He was in his own house. he was in his own bed. He should have been safe, and you did this evil thing. Verse 12, so David gave an order to his men, and they killed them. They cut off their hands and feet and hung the bodies by the pool of Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron. So David honors Ishbosheth the only way he can. He buried the head, and he disgraced the two men that killed Ishbosheth. Not only did he kill them, he cut their heads and their hands and feet off and hung the bodies publicly as a sign of disgrace, where everybody in town could see it. So he's making it publicly obvious he did not agree with the killing of Ishbosheth, and that he considered regicide to be a crime punishable by death. And the trial was not long, just a couple of sentences, and he had him executed and publicly disgraced, that nobody would be able to say David got any honor from that. Yes, God was working things out, and he had a couple of people that were, by their job title, somewhat dishonest, going in stealing things from other countries. It may have been statecraft, it may have been the way things were done, but it was still dishonest. And you didn't put your brightest and best and most loyal people there. Obviously, they weren't loyal to Ishbosheth, even though they were economically required, so to speak. They were very dishonorable people. And David dishonored them more and made a public spectacle of them. That this is the kind of thing that happens if you disobey and kill. And he did Ishbosheth the most honor he could under the circumstances. So now God has cleared out of the way anybody who's crowned king. Abner, who's the kingmaker in Israel, has started the political process of bringing people to crown David king. He's then been killed, so he cannot pick another king for Israel and put him on the throne. God had Ishbosheth killed, and then his two killers executed. And David honors Ishbosheth as much as he can. God has set this up so there is no other king, nobody else to be king. Well, now we know that Jonathan had a son, but he's lame in both feet. If somebody really wanted to put somebody from the house of Saul on the throne, let's face it, they'd be putting a lame man on the throne, and the king was supposed to be a warrior. When you're doing hand-to-hand combat, being crippled in both feet is a fatal flaw. He's unfit to be king, and everybody knows it. Everybody else that could be king is way too young. We're going to learn later that Mephibosheth did have children, but they would have been probably preschoolers at this point in time, if they were alive even. He himself was 5. It's been 7 years, so he's 12. There was times that kings were anointed king that young, but nobody else is alive to be king in Saul's house, and he's unfit. The public would have probably not had him, even if he tried to be. Being lame, he probably doesn't have the personality. He's probably been coddled and things done for him, and he's not the kind of personality then that would want to go out and claim it and do the politics it takes. At age 12, he probably doesn't have the ego and the strength of personality to influence people to be his, to want to anoint him. People would only want to anoint him just to continue the line of Saul. But the people who do that would be viewed as being foolish by the public. You don't anoint a man as king who can't fight. And so the other tribes of Israel, other than Judah, have this political dilemma. They don't have a king. They don't have a candidate to be king. They don't have a kingmaker that made the last king. So what are they going to do? They've already started the process of let's go anoint David king. So that's what they do. Chapter 5, verse 1. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on her military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." So they come to make him king, and they come with this very pleasant speech. You're the one that, when Saul was king, was actually doing the work of being the military leader, that being the king, and you did it to honor him. And you were the one that was promised you were going to be king, with the implication, we've come to make you that person. Verse 3, when all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a compact with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed King David king over Israel. So after this speech, when David knows all the political leaders of Israel are there, he makes a compact, a covenant with them, and they anoint him as king. He is actually currying favor from everybody. He does not force it. He has them come to him. He has enough faith in God that he doesn't have to go out and conquer the country and force them to be under his leadership. He instead encourages them to come to him, and they are the ones that take the initiative. And they're responding, yes, we know Samuel anointed you king, but it's not under compulsion. It's because it's their best interest. And they have their own political reasons, and they're doing it to satisfy their own political needs. David's not going out and trying to win the country to him. He's letting the country come to him and choose him. So in one sense, by the political mechanisms of that day, he's being elected king. He's letting the regional leaders, the tribal leaders, the clan leaders come and essentially vote for him en masse. It was not a formal vote system. It's those who supported him showed up, and everybody looked around and counted noses and go, yeah, this is the vast majority of us. If anybody's out there that is opposed, they're small in number and too few to matter, and they're going to have to get along. And we're the tribal leaders, the very top, had all of them were there. You count and go, yeah, there's 13 of us here, the 12 tribes and Levi, and we all agree. And they could probably count and go, yeah, I've got 5 clans in this tribe, and I've got the 5 leaders of those 5 clans, and et cetera, et cetera. And they knew their own political forces and had called for their own support system to come with them. And essentially, everybody came. Scripture says everybody came. We have no record that anybody was left out. It was in everybody's interest for David to be king. Otherwise, there would be no king and no effective government. And once a vast majority starts saying it, you want to be on the train. And David has lots of points in his favor. He has been a military campaign leader under Saul. He has acted as a king for 6 years there in Hebron over Judah. He has conducted military campaigns as a king. He has effectively run a government. And Samuel has anointed him as a king. So when they come, they ask him to be king. He makes this covenant with them, and they anoint him. So he's now king over all of Israel. Verse 4, David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. Now we know from earlier in a few chapters ago that Ishbosheth reigned for 7 years. David rules for 7 years and 6 months in Hebron, and then he rules from Jerusalem. I'm not going to go into the rest of the chapter, which is him conquering Jerusalem, and conquering the Philistines. That's a different lesson. We'll cover that later. But 6 months after Ishbosheth dies, and we know the time period, he was anointed king, and then he called all Israel and he went and conquered Jerusalem. So it takes him 6 months to get from Ishbosheth's death, to get the whole kingdom and behind him and raise the army and go conquer Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem, if you read Judges with me and went through that lesson, Joshua conquered Jerusalem. It became an Israelite city. The book of Joshua. But if you read Judges with me in those lessons, it had become a Jebusite city again. The Jebusites had taken their city back. So in King David's day, when he was ruling in Hebron, in the middle of Judah, there was a Jebusite city that the Jebusites controlled, and not Judah. It was supposedly part of Judah. And David knows that he wants it as capital. It is in Judah, the most defendable city. It's in an ideal military position. It was the crown jewel of Israel. And it was not an Israelite. it was not Israelite territory, it was somebody else's territory, even though it should have been by Moses and Joshua, Israelite territory. So he makes the crown decision that it's time to conquer it. And it took him 6 months from Ishbosheth's death to make it happen. And once he did, he ruled there for 33 years, making his rule 6 months more than 40 years. We'll deal with that next week. Gracious Lord, thank you for making David king. Thank you for working it out and keeping his hands innocent. In fact, for making him righteous and very obviously righteous to everybody in the country. That he did not work it out himself, but let you work it out for him. And that in the process, he took out people who were immoral. Lord, help us to trust you like David did. That even when the way seems impossible and we don't see how you're going to make it happen, that we'll trust you and let you work out the details. If you tell us to work, have us to do that work, not just sit there idly. But when it's impossible for us, have us to trust you. In your holy name, amen. I am your host, Frank Reich, Associate Pastor at Family and Ministry at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church. And this is Sunday, February 12th, 2023. And we had a good worship service. I love Oscar's series on wisdom. I love where he's going with it. It was good to have Bill and Alice back with us today. We had lots of laughs, and you can ask him about it if you haven't heard already. And the evangelism class tonight was excellent. I urge you, if you're not already attending, to come attend Dale's evangelism class next month when it meets again. It is good material. We are working through lots of things we need to know about who we are and why we need to do evangelism and how to do it. And I urge you to come. It's part of our duty as Christians to be able to defend the faith and try to encourage others to accept Jesus as Lord and Savior also. I hope to see you Wednesday night. If you can't make it, we'll be here on YouTube, and I hope to see you Sunday. You have a blessed week.